if you have the mindset of I'm going to own everything and I'm going to figure out a way to look at every single thing in my life through the lens of how could I have influenced that so that the outcome could have been better, right? And I think that's a powerful way to just go through life. And that goes as far as, like I said, the good things and the bad things. Welcome to Burning the Ships podcast, and I'm your host, Jason Seward, and today I am flying solo. It's been a while since I've done a solo episode, had some nice little run of incredible guests on, and I'm going to start doing probably one or two a month of these moving forward. And so it'll be a mix of interviews and me doing solo podcasts. And the reason is I kind of want to take, and I'll get into this episode here shortly, but kind of want to give some logic on where we're going with this. I've been doing this podcast for over 2 years now. I don't even know what episode this will be, but probably in the 210, 220 range of number of episodes. We have not missed an episode since starting. For a while, we were doing 2 a week. Then as my business started growing and requiring a little bit or a lot more of my attention, I had to bring that down to 1 a week, just to kind of shift some priorities around. But we are now doing 1 a week, and early on in the podcast, I was doing a lot of interviews, and it has consistently been this way, but it's been with real estate people, right? And the reason was a lot of that had to do with, my natural network, just because of the business I'm in. I'm around and connected with a lot of real estate entrepreneurs. So, just probably 75% of my guests have been tied to that world. And a lot of those episodes ended up, because I don't script anything out. Like, I never start an episode with a guest with a roadmap. I really don't. Sometimes if I don't know the person, I'll research them and I'll have a few ideas of things I want to get to in the conversation. But for the most part, it's very unscripted, and we just kind of go where the conversation takes us. Well, as I'm trying to do and treat this authentically, if I had met a lot of these people or we're having a candid conversation, just out and about, like if we're at a bar or having coffee together, the conversation often leads to a real estate conversation. So where maybe my intent was for this podcast to be more mindset, and we certainly cover a lot of that on the show, but mindset, kind of hearing people's stories of getting through adversity and overcoming that, and maybe moving from one period of life into a next period of life. A lot of the conversations ended up talking about tactics within real estate, and that's really not my goal with this podcast. I know there's a place for that, but I didn't want it to be this. So several months ago, I was like, man, do I have the bandwidth to take on another podcast? And by that, I was thinking, continue doing Burning the Ships and kind of move it towards the theme of mindset and getting guests on here that can speak to their journey and their stories and mindset and all the things I just said. But then have another more real estate and business tactical podcast. And I kind of settled on, like, I didn't have the bandwidth to do both when I was originally thinking of this. So I was kind of, with the idea of I'll table it. And as we continue building our business and delegating more and more things, then maybe I can open up more space in my calendar to carry on too. Well, through conversations with Jim Ingersoll, he has been wanting to start a podcast for years, but just didn't want to host it. And he's a identified introvert. So he's a very good relationship builder and connector, but he didn't want to take on the responsibility or role of actually sitting down and interviewing people. He had been on my podcast. We had connected through the Dealmaker community quite a bit. And long story short, we decided that we were going to build under that Dealmaker brand a more real estate focused tactical podcast. So we've done that. And by the time this comes out, I believe that podcast will have launched as well. all that is to say that I am, because of that, and we're rolling with that, we're getting some powerful real estate entrepreneurs on there to talk about, like, really dive into some tactics around different strategies and niches of real estate. It's all great, and I'm excited about it. But it allows me the space now with Burning the Ships to really do what I originally intended to do with it, which is really lean in on mindset, and all the things that, basically I preach to my kids all the time, and so I'm now going to be kind of curating this show to get more guests on here to talk about, like I mentioned earlier, storytelling, kind of talk, and I'll probably still have a lot of real estate folks on here, but we're not going to talk tactics of real estate, or if we do, it'll be very little. So I'm excited about that. So with that, I'm throughout my life, especially in the last, call it 10 years, I consider myself, I'm not an expert by any means, but I consider myself curious enough and well read enough to have some pretty interesting, and sometimes unique perspectives around all things mindset. So, um, what I would like to do moving forward is, I used to do these, the solo episodes, we'd call them the weekly rambles. And, a lot of those were, I would get on there, I'd have a topic I'd want to talk about, and I would just get on and just do exactly what the title was. I'd ramble and sometimes only spend 2 minutes talking about that particular topic. Well, what I want to do now is kind of, um, go through, like, I do so much reading, I listen to so many podcasts, I do so much research on the mind and health and mindset and all these things that aren't related to my business. Well, not directly related. Actually, I feel like they're very related because they influence one another. But I do all this stuff, and I'm going to start using this Burning the Ships podcast to really be an outlet where I can take all that information I'm hearing. When I say I consume a lot of it, it's all that's in my head. I do not listen to the radio unless my kids are in the car, with me, which is a lot. But when I'm on the road by myself, it's always something mindset related in my head, or educational around mindset, health, wellness, things like that. So I'm gonna start compiling all these things into my head, putting them onto paper, or like organizing my thoughts around them, and then sharing them in some solo episodes moving forward. So it's a long way to say you're gonna hear a lot more from me, and just me and my ideas. I'll be the first to say I'm not an expert in any of this. I've already said that. Um, some of my opinions and perspectives on things might not align with everybody that listens. I understand that. That's great. I hope it encourages some dialogue. I love, when I was doing a lot of the weekly rambles, um, I would often get messages from people that, not necessarily disagreed with me, but had more question or wanted to have more dialogue around, a topic I talked about or something like that. And sometimes that was a disagreement, right? We'd have to agree to disagree on stances around certain things. So I encourage that, welcome it. But moving forward, I'm looking forward to this. So I've spent probably the first 10 minutes of this episode kind of setting the table for what's to come. Still going to have guests on. Anybody listening that, has a connection, or maybe you have a story yourself, but I'm looking for folks that, just have stories of resilience, overcoming adversity, building something from nothing, maybe going through difficulty in life, or in business, and they've worked their way through that and have a good story to share about it. So that's what I'm looking for. So send them my way. So now we'll get into this episode, and so I listened to a podcast. It's been probably a month ago, and the host kind of went through his perspective around kind of like fundamental, like foundational traits or core traits that are common denominators among people who tend to do well in life. Now, that's a broad statement, right? Doing well can be defined differently by a bunch of different people. You could line up 100 people and have them explain what they consider success or doing well in life. And you might get 100. Definitely going to get 100 variations, but there's going to be some, differences in how folks see success or wellness. But anyway, this podcaster kind of gave his perspectives around it, and it got me thinking. I agreed with most of it, but it got me thinking about kind of my own list. If I could create a top 10, like top 10 fundamental traits that matter in life, and not just like I'm talking life in general, but I'm talking about relationships, friendships, personal life, your family, your business, just everything all encompassing. What are some fundamental, foundational core traits that I think matter most? And I'm going to kind of go through those. These are not in any particular order, but it's just the list that I compiled based off of my perspectives, right? So they're not right, they're not wrong, they're just mine. And I would think that a lot of people would agree with most of them, but I'd be curious to hear, like, if you're listening to this and you have a top 10, put them together, send me a message on social media or email, whatever works best for you. But I'd be curious to hear others' take on this. So number one for me, and again, this is not in order, I'm just going to kind of go through them, is ownership. Y'all have probably heard me and others talk about the book Extreme Ownership. It sits top of my Mount Rushmore of books, written by Jocko Willing. And by ownership, it just simply means just taking agency over your life, right? Everything, good, bad. And this is more of a mindset, because truly, not like, you can't control everything. Not everything happens because of your choices, your decisions. If I'm sitting here doing this podcast and I'm staring at a window, an alien busts through that window and takes me away from here and takes me up to Mars. I didn't, like, if I'm trying to take ownership, I'm being funny with that scenario or analogy, but if I'm trying to take true ownership of that scenario, I could say, well, maybe I should have put more secure windows in, or whatever the case may be. But the point is, you can't completely, truly own everything. But if you have if you have the mindset of, I'm going to own everything, and I'm going to figure out a way to look at every single thing in my life through the lens of, how could I have influenced that so that the outcome could have been better, right? And I think that's a powerful way to just go through life. And that goes as far as, like I said, the good things and the bad things. So it's easy to do on the good things. When you have a win, you close a deal, or you win at a sporting event, or you do really well on a test, or um, you hit a home run on a date night with your wife. Like, y'all just go out, you planned it, or you're a husband if you're a wife listening to this, but you planned it and you planned a perfect date night and everything went perfect. That's a win, right? It's easy to take ownership over those things. The things that are not easy to take ownership are the bad things, right? Let's go back to the date night example. You took ownership of it. You're going to plan a date night. You got the reservation mixed up. You reserved the table for 6 and you thought you did it for 7. You get there at 7, there's no table there. You screwed up, right? You got a hotel room on the ocean front. And this has happened to me, so I'm going to share this example. You think you booked the Hyatt on the oceanfront in Virginia Beach, when in reality you booked the Hyatt at the town center in Virginia Beach, and you got that mixed up, and there's no rooms at the oceanfront. So there are things that happen that are a negative outcome that are harder to take ownership. And those two, I'm giving silly examples, but because you can make this analogy in business, life, relationships, or anything. But in all those cases, my instinct is to try to find out who messed up, right? Who messed up? Well, that's not the right mindset. The right mindset is, I messed up. I was responsible for this. And now in all those scenarios, like, you can have a good mindset, and that's small adversity. You get through it, everything will be fine. But I messed up. I'm going to take ownership of it. I'm sorry. I screwed up, and I'll try not to do that again next time. I'm going to be better next time. And that mindset, when you don't blame anybody in business, you don't blame the market, you don't blame your customers, you don't blame all these outside influences, you don't blame the economy. Um, in leadership, you don't blame the people under you. You're their leader. If they screw up, you put them in that position to screw up. You didn't train them well. you didn't hold them accountable, whatever the case may be, but you created that. So take ownership of it. You control the effort, you control the preparation, you control the discipline, and you control how you respond when things go wrong. And that is extreme ownership. So that's number one. Number two is discipline. You know, it's kind of cliche, but like motivation is temporary, discipline is permanent. That's couldn't be more true. How many? It's the age old story of the month of January, the gym is packed. Right, first 2 weeks of January, the gym is packed. Everybody's in there because they're motivated to go into a new year and really get after it and change their lives, their mindset around health and wellness and all that stuff, right? So they're motivated and they're coming off of, leading into that motivation. If you're not watching, I'm doing air quotes, that motivation. They just had 2 months of eating recklessly and just not taking care of themselves through the holidays with the mindset of, I'm really motivated next year, I'm going to get things in gear. So they get motivated. They don't have a baseline of discipline. They have a motivation, a temporary motivation. So they go into the gym, busting it. Now their body's sore. They're doing it for a week or two. God, this sucks. Routine settle back in. Motivation starts to wane. Discipline was never there. They're right back into the same routine and it's gone, right? So, you know, things are easy at the start of the year, right? You just came off the holidays. Anybody can perform when things are easy. Same way with business. When things are going good, like I think in real estate, back to, like from 2017 to 2022, we absolutely rolled. And we could have done 10 times more than we did, but we had jobs, right? So we could only go so fast, so far during that time frame. But I'm not going to say it was easy, but relative to most time frames in real estate, it could not have been easier for us. Like every deal worked out, everything worked out perfectly. It was easy, right? So it was easy to be motivated during that time. We were making a lot of offers. A lot of offers were getting accepted. We were buying a lot of deals. Well, the real separator is the ability to show up like when those things aren't happening, when things aren't when things aren't as convenient and not working as well as, they are in good times, right? It's hard to show up then. So you got to be disciplined. It's hard to show up when maybe your relationships are floundering a little bit, right? Maybe, God, I'll talk about, Katie and I, like we have periods where there is so much on our plates, right? With the kids, all their athletics, all their school stuff, all of my business stuff, all of Katie's teaching stuff. We both coach different things. It gets overwhelming, right? And so, like, when things are that overwhelming and that busy in life, it is easy to not be motivated to keep our relationship strong, right? But the reason we're able to do so is because we have practiced discipline over the years in our marriage, right? We are disciplined in the fact that we're going to have our date nights. I don't care what's going on. We're going to call one of the grandmas up. If it's been a month or so since we've had a night together, like out where with no kids, we're going to make sure it happens. And that's not being, we're always motivated to do that. But when things get busy, that motivation is gone. It's really hard to find it, but we're very disciplined in our nurturing of our relationship, right? Same thing in business with Bill and I. We get fired up some weeks. We wake up Monday morning, it's time to roll. Let's go crush it. And we do. We go out and crush it. There's some times where, like, I'll take you back. I'm recording this a couple weeks after we did a cruise with our families. That was great. It was a great week. We relaxed. Everything was good. Coming back off that cruise, Bill and I were not motivated. Neither one of us. We talked about it throughout the week. We're like, man, we're in a fog. It's hard to get going again. But we had to get through that week because we had a lot going on. And what got us through that week? Discipline. We know, we wake up, we do the things we have to do for our business to move the needle, even when motivation isn't there. So discipline is number two. I can give so many examples and stuff of how discipline shows up in our lives, right? And when I say ours, I'm talking about my wife and I, my kids and I, my friends who are also share these same perspectives around discipline. Motivation's great. I love it. I consider myself a motivational person. As a leader in my former career and now in my current business, that's my role. I want to motivate people to go out and get after it. But I'm very aware that that's not always going to be there. That's not always going to be there in buckets, right? So when it's not, I've got to motivate people to lean on their discipline. And if they're not a disciplined person, fundamentally something's off. Their foundation is cracked. They've got to fix that before they can depend on motivation to do anything. So discipline compounds over time, no question about it. Integrity, simple. Do what you say you're gonna do. You want to be thought of as an individual that, like, when people talk about you, all right, tell me about Jason. I met him at an event. Seems like a nice guy. Tell me about him. You know what I want people to say is, yeah, he's a super nice person, but you can take what he says to the bank. Take it to the bank, right? If he lets you down, or if he doesn't show up to something he was supposed to, something has happened. Something got crossed, and some wires got crossed, and it's not because his intent was to stand you up or to not do what he says. That's how I want people to talk to me or talk about me. I remember, and I shared this recently at an event I was at. I was talking about my grandfather, and the conversation we were talking about was how common it is now to see people physically interacting. So two people talking, whether it's at a dinner table or just at an event or wherever they're at, they're physically together talking to one another. And one of those people, and for those watching, I'm doing it on camera right now. One of those people is the whole time, yeah, I hear you. They're looking down at their phone for those that are listening. So they're engaged in the sense I'm physically there, I'm present with you, but I'm showing you that there's something on my phone that also has my attention. That was the conversation. So I use the example of my grandfather, who for years, he didn't have a cell phone, but there's always been something to distract people from a conversation. My grandfather died in 2016. And when we were at the viewing or the visitation the night before the funeral, I had one of his old friends come up to me, and we were just talking about my granddad. And I didn't know this person. They knew me through my grandfather and were around me a lot when I was a kid. But they said to me, and this was so profound, it has stuck with me ever since. They said that what they loved most about my grandfather, and my grandfather's name was JJ, who we named our son after, JJ. But they said the thing they appreciated most about him is no matter who he was talking to, he made them feel as if they were the most important person on the planet in that moment. And what do you mean by that? He meant that my grandfather was a busy man. He was involved with a lot of things. He always had things on his mind. But when you had his attention, you had his attention. He wasn't looking around. He wasn't checking his watch. If he had a cell phone, he wasn't checking the cell phone. You had him. You had his attention, his full attention, and he was going to be interested in what you are talking about, right? So that made me think, and then I'm talking about integrity, about how I interact with people. And I have, I'm sure I peeked at my phone when talking to people before. And if I do, I regret it. And I try to teach my kids this: put the phone down or any other distractions. If you're going to take the time and give somebody your attention, right? You're gifting them your attention, give it to them, and do not let anything else come in the way of that, because as a form of integrity, you owe it to them to be present and give them your attention, because they're craving your attention in that moment. Give it to them. So that aligns with integrity in the sense of you're someone that is going to, like, I think attention is just as important as doing what you say you're going to do, which is also part of integrity. But if I'm watching your mouth move and I'm not hearing anything you're saying and I'm not acknowledging it, you're not getting my attention. And I don't think that's a good integrity play, right? So I just want to share that example from my grandfather. But integrity, like your word should mean something, your attention should mean something, and people should feel that in relationships, in business, in investing. Like your reputation is your currency, right? It is something that you can either spend recklessly or you can spend it wisely. And then once that integrity is or that reputation is compromised, it's virtually impossible to rebuild, right? I have to be careful sharing examples because I know a lot of people will hear this and see this and wonder, who's he talking about? But recently, um, I've had a handful of podcast guests scheduled to be on the podcast. Um, we had good communication leading up to it. And then come time of recording that we had scheduled that I had blocked my calendar off for, they're a no-show. Now I understand. And none of these examples did something personally happen in their situation to prevent it. They simply forgot. They didn't check their calendar, whatever the case may be, life got in the way, and I understand that. But this goes with integrity. I'm not saying these people have poor integrity, but they said they were going to do something, they committed to doing something, and they didn't show up to do that something. And I'm not going to sit here and doubt their integrity forevermore, but it's going to be tough. Like, that's going to be in the back of my mind. That person promised me they're going to do something, they didn't do it. That's a shot at their integrity. I don't want to be that person. If I don't show up to something, you better call 911 or call my wife and make sure I'm okay. That's it is going to be an honest mistake if I don't show up and something happened, because if I say I'm going to do something or I'm going to be somewhere, I'm going to be there. It means that much to me, and it's that important. That's integrity. Integrity is also not situational. It shouldn't show up when, in situations that mean something selfishly to you. You should show up, and integrity should show up all the time, all the time. No exceptions. Moving on. Number 4, resilience. I won't spend a lot of time on this because it's pretty obvious, but I think this is a fundamental trait that folks either need to have or need to build. And I do believe that you're not either born with resilience or not. This is something that's developed over time, and it can be built, and I've talked about this a lot. It can be built whether you're 7 years old or 70 years old or 97 years old. You can build resilience in business and life and everything in between. You know, One thing that is guaranteed in life, it's guaranteed. There's no way around it, is adversity. And a lot of folks have a tough time accepting that. They think adversity is the exception to the rule. No, adversity is life. Life is adversity. In business, markets shift, right? Deals fall apart. People disappoint you. That's adversity. In personal life, there's breakups, there's heartbreaks. You're going to lose some really good people in your life. You're going to be disappointed by people in your life. You're going to have people not show up for you. All these things. It's going to happen. So if you approach life understanding that these things are going to happen, and then you also approach life with, I'm going to harden myself to deal with them. I understand they're going to happen. I'm going to hope they don't, or hope they're limited when they do. But I'm going to be prepared for it. And resilience, like, it's the best way I can define it, the way I look at it, is your ability to take a punch and adjust and keep moving forward without losing focus on whatever the vision is, right? So if life punches you, if business punches you or whatever, don't lay down. Like, wipe it off, brush it off, and keep moving forward. If it punches you again, keep moving forward. And if it keeps punching you when you keep doing the same thing over and over, you might want to learn to bob and weave, take some lessons, do something, but learn how to deal with it and move through it. Curiosity. I put this as my number 5. Again, these are in no order. Curiosity has been the thing that has served me best in my life, right? I am, and I have always been, probably annoyingly so, a very, very, very curious person, right? I'm not an expert, I would say, in much at all. Like, I would consider, if I had to, like, put the label of expertise, like things I'm an expert in. Hunting, maybe. I feel like you put me on any farm across this country with a bow and arrow and give me a couple weeks to study it and try to harvest the biggest animal on that farm. I feel like I have a good enough knowledge base. Good enough to call myself an expert in that area. I think I'm a expert to some degree in mindset and all these things I'm talking about, just because I've chosen to study it and build it over the years. But outside of that, I'm not an expert in anything. But one thing I am is very curious, right? I'll give a couple examples. I am not a mechanic, an auto mechanic. I could not take down an engine, pull it apart, put it back together. No idea. But I'm fascinated by people that can do that, right? So that makes me curious about it. Like, I'm not curious to the point where I'm going to say, I want to, over the next year, learn how to become a great auto or a diesel mechanic or something like that. But I'm fascinated by people who are curious and experts in that area. So I'll sit here and I'll watch a YouTube video of on muscle cars and the different things, the mechanics around them and stuff like that. I don't know that stuff. I can't like go turn that wrench and do all the things they're doing, but I'm curious about it, right? And that curiosity, what it's done over the years and years that I've been curious about everything, I know a little bit about everything, right? And it's positioned me to, from a like a socializing standpoint, I can have a conversation with just about anybody on just about any topic, right? And I can hang in that conversation. Now, I'll be the first to admit to them, oh, I don't know much about this, but I understand what you're talking about and I'm curious. Or if I don't, I'm going to ask questions and I want to know more. And I think that's served me well from a networking standpoint. It's definitely served me well on this podcast because when I interview people, sometimes they're talking about things I don't know anything about. I interviewed somebody the other day talking about buying and selling notes, real estate notes. I've heard about it. I don't know much about it. And I was so curious that like it fired me up. We ended up talking an hour after we recorded the podcast because I just had so many questions. So that's my curiosity. And I do think that, fundamentally is a good trait for everybody to have because it just keeps you sharp and learning. And if you're curious, you don't ever run out of things to be interested in, right? I like for me, a lot of my growth has happened because I have a willingness like to challenge my own assumptions, if that makes sense, right? I might assume things or have a perspective around things, but I'm always open to hearing other people's thoughts and perspectives. And I'm willing to change mine if it makes sense. And that curiosity feeds that. Like I think anybody that believes they already have the answers, they're not growing anymore. They're dying. They're either stagnant or they're dying because nobody has all the answers. So curiosity for me, it has just kept me learning, it's kept me adapting, and it's kept me evolving. Decisiveness. This is a big one for me. Um, Again, I mentioned earlier, I'm not an expert at anything, but I'm very, very strong at making quick decisions. I don't always make the right decision, but I make enough quick decisions that enough of them are good decisions that it's a net gain in my life, right? So I think indecision kills momentum. I think and I talked about momentum earlier, right? I, it when I'm thinking through how I want to articulate this, but I have a lot of people in my network, they overthink everything, right? It'll take them 10 minutes to send a text message because they're thinking exactly how to put it. And that there's probably some benefit to that, right? Me, I just go. I make quick decisions. I don't overthink. If something requires me to think a good bit about it, and I am a very thoughtful person, I'm in my head all the time. But if it's like a big decision I need to make, and I know it's going to require a lot of thought, that's when I bring in my resources. The people that I trust the most, my mentors, my business partner, my wife, people I trust their opinions, and I get them to help me work through my thoughts on that. And then I make a quick decision. I don't think you need perfect information to move forward with a decision. Like, you just need enough information to make a calculated decision and then adjust if needed. And I think the reason I'm able to be so decisive, and I think a lot of folks, just fast movers, entrepreneurs, a lot of folks that play big games, they're also so decisive because they trust their ability to figure it out if they get it wrong. And that's me. Like, that's how I am. I trust myself so much. And I'll say that I'm not trying to say that in an arrogant way, but I'm so confident in my ability to figure things out. Just because I always, and sometimes I don't figure them out, but I'm confident in my ability that I can, that it allows me to make quick decisions, not scared of those decisions being wrong, if that makes any sense. So I'm not scared of, I'll give a real recent example. Bill and I, we just bought a house in the Newport News market. Not the best deal, but it was a deal, and it was in front of us, and I could see long term, no matter what happens, this thing was going to work out. And my mind real quickly was made up. All right, here are the numbers. I know what it can do now. We're not going to lose money on it. Might not be a home run short term. It's going to be a home run long term. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. I was so quick to say, let's go and buy that house, because we had to move pretty quickly on it. Because if it doesn't work out the way I thought, I've been through this a million times. I know that my ability to figure a problem out and get through it is there. And so I was confident making a very quick, decisive decision. All right. Humility. Just talked about my confidence in that area. And that's important. But humility keeps you coachable. It keeps me, anyway, able to feed that curiosity and be curious, and that I talked about earlier. Humility, like, I'm humble in all of my opinions, right? There's very few things that I dig my heels in, right? And those things are typically around, like, my core values, right? Being kind to people, being loyal. I'll talk about loyalty here in a second, but like, my core values, I'm pretty set in. But everything else, like, I have an open ear. I'm humble enough to know that I might not be right on all these things, and I've kind of always approached life that way. And I think being humble and exercising humility, it allows us to listen, learn, admit when I'm wrong. It it allows me to do all that, like, without letting my ego get in the way of my own improvement, right? So I think humility is a big trait, a big characteristic, that needs to be a pivotal piece, or a big cinder block in that foundation. So just mentioned loyalty. We'll start wrapping this up here in a little bit because I'm going long-winded. But mention loyalty. Um, like, the strongest businesses and relationships are built on trust and loyalty, right? If you stand by your people, you invest in those relationships, and you show appreciation, um, that's the core, the center of everything, I think, is loyalty, and building and fostering all of that around relationships. Like, success is rarely built alone. For me and for us and, like, our business, we depend on loyalty. We're a small relative, like, for folks that hear the numbers and stuff, you may say, oh, they're a big lender. We're relatively small lenders. There's these giant warehouse lenders out there that are dealing with billions of dollars of institutional capital. We're not dealing with that, right? We can't give all the bells and whistles that they're getting, right? Our terms are not always going to be competitive with them. So we have to depend on loyalty. Well, how do you build loyalty? We give up what we're giving up in terms, and not being able to compete with the big boys and girls. We make up for with giving exceptional service, like real communication, real people. You're dealing with people that are real, local, all those things. And because of that, our borrower base, we've just built up loyalty within it. We have people that, I'm not going to say that they're only going to use us for every loan, because that probably wouldn't be responsible for their business, but we're always going to be on the list of folks they call, always. And it's because we've built that loyalty over time. We're going to be loyal to them. They're going to be loyal to us. And that goes without saying, obviously, in relationships, and every other aspect of life. Consistency, huge one. Consistency compounds, right? Small actions repeated daily create massive results over time. Just finished, I'm in a book club with Brandon Lindsay on the Rehabber's Playbook. And one of the books we just read, or I've read it a million times, but not a million, a lot. It's one of my favorite books, Compound Effect. And it talks about this throughout the whole book. And it talks about having consistency in your habits, in your communications, in your effort, in your follow through, all these things. And consistency is what ultimately builds credibility and momentum. Okay. So, I like to use the example of, and y'all that have heard me talk about it before, probably annoyed hearing me talk about it, but Bill and I have worked out every single day since September 1st, 2021. I don't even know how many days that is now. It's got to be approaching 2,000 days, every day. Now, not every day is a gut-wrenching workout. Some days are, it's a nice long walk. And that's a workout. We moved our body in a way that we wouldn't have if we weren't trying to stick to these parameters, or that, we have guidelines around what counts as a workout and what doesn't. So over time, that consistency, it became just an ego bet, right? Just something, a pride thing, who can do it the longest and keep the streak going. Now it's turned into something that has completely changed my life, right? It has changed my health. Every year, my physical age gets older and older and older. I'm 44 now. My biological age goes down and down and down, because it's consistency of doing the same thing over and over and over and keeping my body moving and active. And that same thing applies to our business. We started 60AB Capital Funding from scratch, zero. It didn't exist. We started it. We consistently did the things that weren't sexy. They were not, at first, rewarding, but we knew over time, if we consistently did them, it would work. 3 years later, or not quite three, we're coming up on 3 in a couple months. We built it beyond what we thought was possible. And now we're perfecting it, dialing it in even further, and continuing to strategically grow it at this point. Why did we do that? We didn't give up, and we were consistent. So I think consistency, you take all these that I've talked about, and they all play a role in that foundation that I'm talking about. But consistency, none of them work without being consistent with all the other ones, right? Consistency, consistently loyal, consistently credible, consistent in your discipline, consistent in all these areas. This one matters the most, I think. And lastly, what I wrote down, and I could probably name 30 traits, but the last one I put down was vision. You got to see the future before others can. And I'm talking about your future, right? Vision, having a vision, it gives you a direction. It gives you a way to channel your efforts, right? If I don't have a vision to work towards, a goal, whatever you want to call it, all this energy I have, I don't know where to direct it, right? If I didn't have something that allowed me to like zone in, I think anybody that knows me, or if you've listened to me talk enough, you know that there's a lot of energy in this body right now. And if I didn't have something, reins around it, guardrails, I think of it like a bowling alley, right? I got to have the bumper guards up, or the gutter guards up. If I don't, I'm gonna end up in the gutter every single time, because I veer off. I chase too many things, right? So I've got to have that vision, those 10 pins at the end to focus on, in order to keep within the guardrails, right? So for me, it directs my energy to have a vision. Without a vision, I think like all of my discipline and all these other things I'm talking about, they just become random effort, right? I might be working working my butt off, but I have no direction for it, right? So I'm really working, I'm getting after it, to everybody looking, I'm really working hard, But if the vision's not there and I don't have anything to direct it towards, it's just random. Like with vision, then all these things, it becomes progress. I'm moving towards something, a final destination, which for me, I don't know that there is a final destination, but it gives me something to work towards. So with that, I'm going to kind of go in reverse order and go through all of my 10 traits one more time and list them. And that'll wrap up my thoughts around this. So we just talked about vision. I said consistency, number 2, loyalty, number 3. I'm doing these in reverse order. Humility, decisiveness, curiosity, resilience, integrity, discipline, and ownership. Those are my 10 fundamental traits that matter in life, relationships, and business. And again, I think if you ask 100 people to list out 10, probably have some of these on there. But there's going to be uniqueness in everybody's perspective here. I'd love to hear your perspectives around these. What did I get right? What did I get wrong? What do I need to tweak? But for me, this is a pretty good foundation to build my world off of, and it's served me pretty well so far. So with that, I'm going to wrap up another episode of Burning the Ships podcast. I thank you for joining me, and we'll see you guys next time. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Burning the Ships. I want to give a special thanks to our sponsor, 608B Capital, helping real estate investors secure fast, reliable funding to fuel their boldest moves. If you're ready to take your investing to the next level, visit 608bcapital.com to learn more. If you found value in today's episode, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but it also helps us reach more people who are ready to burn the ships and commit fully to their goals. And don't forget to share the episode with someone who needs that extra push to take bold action. I'll leave you with this. Burning the ships isn't just about removing the option to retreat. It's about unlocking the courage to charge forward. No matter the odds, the past is behind you and the future is yours to conquer. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time on Burning the Ships.